in Kutztown. Today's webinar is related to the IRS and the FTC pertaining to tax professionals and other financial industry businesses. So we're looking at phishing, ransomware, and social engineering and how tax firms get breached and how to stop it. So this is all about protecting your clients, your EFIN, and your firm. So today's agenda, we've got the threat landscape, phishing deep dive, ransomware and how it hits tax firms, social engineering tactics, real examples, your defense checklist, and then your business risk assessment. So let's get started. So the threat landscape to tax firms, tax firms are high value targets. They've got social security numbers, bank account information, income information, and business financials for hundreds or thousands of clients in one place. That's a gold mine. Think about, if you're looking for people to target, a tax firm has all the information on people that you may target. So you breach the tax firm, and then you've got a wealth of information to move your attack to the next victim. So 91% of breaches start with a phishing email. So significant, it's very important to learn about phishing and security awareness training. $4.5 million is the average cost of a data breach. Pretty significant in the financial industry because of the regulations and compliance issues. $8,000 is the average ransomware demand of small businesses, which sounds like a small amount, but there are huge financial repercussions aside from the ransomware demand alone. And then 60% of small firms will close after a breach just due to the financial ramifications. So again, $8,000 is the average ransomware demand, but the average cost of the breach is upwards of $4.5 million. So think about the repercussions that are behind all that. Phishing deep dive. So the number one way that tax firms get compromised. Standard phishing. There's three different types of phishing here. You've got standard phishing, which is where a mass email will impersonate the IRS, the tax software vendor like Intuit or other vendors, financial institutions, and the subject lines will usually say something like, your EFIN has been suspended, or urgent, the IRS e-file portal updates required. So something that's going to pique your interest because it pertains to you, and then there's always some sense of urgency behind it to make you react without thinking. The second one is spear phishing. So these are targeted emails that are using your firm's name, a client's name, or your software vendor. The attacker has done their research on your firm and knows how to target you in particular. And then these are convincing, even experienced professionals fall for them. So these spear phishing attempts, much more tailored to your business than a standard phishing attack. And then the last one is whaling. These attacks often target the owners directly. They often impersonate the IRS or state tax authority, requesting wire transfers or credential resets. So, usually the owner of a firm will be the one that handles anything pertaining to the IRS or the state. So these will often be directed towards the owner. So at the bottom there, so real IRS alert, the IRS Dirty Dozen, so the top 12 ways that a firm is breached, it lists tax-related phishing as a top threat every year. They will never initiate contact via email, and any email claiming to be from the IRS is a scam. So again, the scammers will impersonate the IRS and make a very convincing email to you. But what the IRS is saying is that they will never send an email to you to correspond with critical information. The next item is ransomware. So this is the next most common threat to tax firms. So how it hits tax firms and why tax season is the prime time. So number one is the entry. So this is typically an employee will click an email and they'll open a malicious attachment. So one of those two ways. So that takes 1 second. In a split second, you can be on your way to being compromised. And then number two, so once the compromise is initiated and they've got entry, the next step is spreading. So the malware will silently spread across your network, often for days before activating. So the malware will sit silently in the network and spread among all the systems in there. And then the next step is 3, locking the systems. So every file on every connected device is encrypted. There's client data, tax returns, everything is encrypted. And this could include the computers on the network. If you've got external hard drives attached to computers, those could be vulnerable. Some firms will have a network attached storage device, a NAS they call them, and those could be vulnerable to encrypting. And then the number 4, the next step is the demand. So once they've gained entry and spread to all the systems, and now they've got everything encrypted, now the ransom note appears, and the average demand is starting at $8,000 and upwards of $50,000. But there's no guarantee that paying the ransom is going to work. We've seen in recent years where it turns from ransomware into espionage, or if you don't pay the demand, or even if you do, sometimes they will still reach out to your contacts to let them know that your business was breached. So it's gone from ransomware to something even more critical. And then number 5, the last step is the aftermath. So when you've had a vulnerability or a breach or ransomware, the last step, you've got to notify the IRS. You've got to let them know that you've been breached and all of your taxpayer information that you handle may be at risk. And then client information is required so they know who to contact. And then they may potentially review your EFIN to ensure that you're doing everything that they require in their compliance to protect your business, your firm, your taxpayer information. So it's very critical that we're protecting tax firm information. And then the last one little kind of tidbit to all of this. So I've already seen where it's very common for scam pop-ups to come up that say that they're from Microsoft or McAfee, and people will call the number and get someone remoted into their system thinking it's the legitimate company trying to help. It happens to individuals. I've seen it happen to tax offices themselves and other businesses. And in a scenario like that, if you fall for a scam and have someone connected into your systems, that is another IRS notifiable breach. So the person that connects into your system, thinking that they're helping you, they could very well be pulling all of the information off of your network. So I've seen a tax office, husband and wife. They were one click away from a breach, a legitimate breach. They were on the phone with the scammer, and then luckily something in their stomach said this isn't right. So they reached out to us. So luckily they didn't get remote connectivity to the scammer. But that's just another example that, in a split second, things can go wrong quick. So why is tax season prime time? So attackers will know that you're going to be too busy to notice unusual activity. They time attacks for anywhere from January to April when you're overwhelmed. Backups might be skipped or overlooked, and you can't afford downtime. So paying the ransom feels like the only option. And I've seen this time and time again. I know one tax office that does thousands of taxes in the course of 4 months. So they're pumping out a few dozen a day for the course of a 3 to 4 month window. So I know that they, if anything went down, they would be dead in the water and extremely need their systems back up. So, that it's prime time, tax season. You need things to work. You need things to be uninterrupted, and that's when they will target you. And the other thing is they may have already entered and spread their attack, but maybe they're going to wait until January, February, March to actually unleash the locking and demand. So even though it's out of tax season right now, there is a good chance that the environment's already compromised. They're just waiting for the time of year to actually start. And then the last item is social engineering. So this is the human hack. There's no tech skills required. It's when an attacker manipulates a person, not a computer, into handing over access, credentials, or money. And technology can't stop this, but training can. So this is actually kind of goes back to my previous mentioning of the remote support scam. So what different types of human hack social engineering tricks are there? So you've got the phishing, which is voice phishing. The caller will claim to be from the IRS or your software support. So again, like Intuit, and they'll pressure you to verify your EFIN or reset your password portal over the phone. And they create urgency. So they'll say something like, "Oh, your filing access will be suspended in 24 hours." So there's always a sense of urgency that they will do to make you skip critical thinking. Like if you're in this situation, you might not think clearly. So especially if they're giving a sense of urgency, it may cloud your judgment even further. And then below that, you've got tech support scams. So this is where I had mentioned, so you've got the pop-up or a caller claims that your computer has a virus and support asks for remote access. That once they're in, they may install the malware, steal your credentials, or lock you out and demand payment to restore access. So again, it'll be that scam pop-up that comes up. There's always some sort of bells and alerts and buzzers going off, so it's kind of overwhelming to the hearing. And then there's usually some flashing that's on the screen, so it kind of overwhelms your senses. Again, creating a sense of urgency, like, oh, there's that phone number right there on the screen. Let me call this. Something's not right. But it's actually the phone number to the scammers. And then pretexting. So attackers will impersonate a known client, the payroll company, or your bank, and they'll send a convincing email with just enough detail to seem legitimate, but then they'll ask you to update your payment routing or click a link to verify a return. So again, they're using businesses that they may have the logo and the name of the business and maybe even the name of the person that your contact at that business. The more believable they can make it, the more likely you are to click it. And then the last item is impersonation. So when someone walks into the office or they call claiming to be from a software vendor or your IT company, they may ask you to plug in a device or access a workstation for routine maintenance. So physical access, that's going to give them full compromise capability. So unless you know the person or you call the company to confirm that this person is supposed to be here, don't ever let anybody touch your systems that is not an employee and you aren't expecting to be there. So some real examples, it's happening to firms just like yours, doesn't matter how big or small. So phishing, there was a CPA firm in Pennsylvania. They had a staff member received an email that appeared to be from the Drake software company asking to update their login credentials. And then the attacker used those stolen credentials to access over 200 client tax files. So they got the email, they clicked the link, they thought they were updating their credentials, but really what they were doing is giving their credentials to the scammer, who was then able to gain full access to all of those credentials or all of those, tax clients. So then the EFIN was reviewed, the client notifications were sent, and then the firm spent 3 weeks in recovery mode. So think about that. If it's during tax time, you're losing almost 25% of your, probably more like 30% of your filing time due to being down because of this phishing breach. And then the client notification, along with that usually comes credit monitoring and reporting and things like that, because if your client information is leaked and their information ends up on the dark web, a criminal could be using their information to get a credit card or file for other accounts. So usually when your company is breached, it is required that you have to provide monitoring of the credit of any clients that were part of the breach. So think about that as another expense. And then an example, ransomware. So this was for a tax prep office. All they did was work during the tax season. They got a malicious PDF, and that's how the ransomware got deployed. This was in February, so just at the beginning of filing season. And then every workstation was locked, and it took 6 days before a critical filing deadline that it was finally back up and running. So there was a $22,000 ransom paid, and not all files were recovered. And then several clients missed the deadline. So again, think about the repercussions to that. If your clients are missing the filing deadline with the IRS doesn't care what happened. You need to file on time or file an extension. And all of that, costs money, which is going to fall back on the tax office. Oops, sorry. And then the last item is social engineering. So a solo enrolled agent, just one person doing it out of their home. The caller claimed to be an IRS e-services help desk person, and they asked the agent to verify their PTIN and EFIN due to suspicious activity. And then from there, the credentials were stolen within minutes. So, they were on the phone with them. They gave them the information they needed. And here it was a scammer, and they got all the information they needed. So from there, the IRS suspended the EFIN pending investigation, and then no client filings processed for 11 days. So again, imagine losing a week and a half of filing if you're a solopreneur. That's quite a bit of time to be down, to be behind, with no income coming in. So your defense checklist. So these are some items that can help you prevent breaches before they even start. So technical controls, you've got enabling multi-factor authentication on all of your tax portals and email. So multi-factor can mitigate an enormous amount of risk. And then use email filtering, which will help block spoofed domains. We can, we do that here where we have the DKIM, DMARC, and SPF. So there's different records that you can do on your email domain that help block spoof domains from even coming to your mailbox. And then keeping all software and your operating system fully updated. So I know a lot of tax offices during tax season, they won't shut down or restart their computers because they've got so many things open. The problem with that is you're not installing updates on a regular basis. So if there's a vulnerability that's discovered in February and then it is actively being exploited come March, and you still haven't restarted your computer and had those updates installed, you could become a victim. So it's very important to keep your software and operating system up to date. And then encrypted offsite backups that are tested monthly. So having computer backups is important. Having them offsite in case something happens to your tax office is even more important. But then the most important is testing them, because computer backups that are not tested are as good as no backup at all. There's times where backups for some reason become corrupt, or maybe they haven't gone off in days or months, and nobody noticed because it's not being monitored. And then separate network for client-facing devices. I know some offices that have, when they have people come in and they may be there for 10, 15, 20 minutes, they may have free Wi-Fi. And in the cases where we've seen, in some cases, it is one network that they're connecting to. So client devices that may be compromised from home are now connecting onto a business network, and very well could compromise everything on that business network. So having two separate networks is critical. And then having an endpoint detection and response, or an EDR, on all computers. So a traditional antivirus is not enough. Traditional antivirus will find viruses that are on a computer, but if there's malware that gets installed or ransomware that starts encrypting, traditional antivirus isn't going to be able to do anything with that. So endpoint detection and response, that looks for weird activity and will actually prevent it or stop it from happening. So say in the instance of ransomware, if files start to get encrypted as part of the ransomware attack, EDR will typically be able to segregate that section and go, something weird is happening here, and alert somebody who is monitoring the systems with the EDR software. So then, basically it's preventing the ransomware from gaining a full foothold in the system, but then it's also alerting someone that something weird is happening, so that they can follow up, as a human being with their knowledge, they can follow up and know what's going on. And then on the flip side, the human controls, which is the most important area. So annual phishing awareness training and documented. So the IRS does request that if employees are being trained, well, it does require employees to be trained, but then also you must document that they're being trained and what's being done, so that you can prove to them that, yes, my employees are being trained, they know what to look for with phishing emails. So that way, if they would fall for one, it's documented that you've been educating them. Never verify credentials over the phone or email. It's very important that, if someone's calling you or if someone's sending you an email requesting this information, don't verify it that way. If anything, if the call or email was incoming and requesting that, my personal approach is call that particular person or business directly, that with the number, and ask someone there, is this legitimate that you're asking me for this information? And then call back clients on known numbers, not ones that they give you. So, if a client drops off tax information and they provide you their phone number, only correspond with them on that phone number. If something were to happen where their phone number was compromised and then someone sends you a text or something and says, give me a call on this phone number. Do not do that. Only call the number that the client provided to you. And then verify any wire or payment changes request by voice. So if you get a text message or an email, or a message elsewhere that's requesting a change for the wire transfer, the e-payment, always call the client and confirm the legitimacy of that request. Report suspicious contacts to your security lead immediately. So as part of the IRS requirements, there must be a security lead at every firm. For solopreneurs, it is the owner. For larger firms, they may have somebody, whether it's their IT provider or someone else in the office, that is the security lead. So anything suspicious gets reported to that lead immediately. And then the written policy. So this is also known as the WISP. Who can grant access, remote access, and when. So as part of the WISP, it's important to know, like, who should be allowed to have remote access to the systems and when. So think about, like, if you're having some support, you need something to be looked at remotely by your IT provider, that needs to be written in there, that IT provider on an as-needed basis when requested by the client, something to that effect. So in the last steps here, so don't wait for a breach to find out you were exposed, because unfortunately, if a tax firm is breached, this needs to be reported to the IRS. So we offer a business risk assessment so that we'll show you exactly where your firm is vulnerable. It's a 30-minute call, and we ask a series of questions to kind of gauge your knowledge or your configuration in your environment to know where you could be vulnerable. And if you've already got an IT provider, that's perfectly fine. We provide a summary at the end of the call, and you can take that summary back to your provider to help them ensure that everything in that list that maybe you weren't sure of or you may be vulnerable, your current provider can address. So it's not a call of let's replace your provider. It's a call of let's confirm where you're vulnerable and make sure that you're protected, even if it is your provider helping. So again, what's included is the phishing vulnerability assessment, a couple of questions related to phishing, email security and MFA audit, and then backup and ransomware recovery review. So again, series of questions. It's been very informative to the clients we've done it to. And again, some have brought us in then to help remediate where there's vulnerabilities, and some have taken the summary and had their current provider fix it for them. So if you're interested in that business risk review, you can go to businessrisk.bnrcomputers.com and schedule your risk review, and then we'll be able to help. So that is the end of our webinar. If you've got any questions, you've got any ideas or comments, please feel free to give us a call, send us an email, go to our website, fill out the chat form. We're always happy to hear feedback and help anybody that may need it. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.